Hello and welcome to Indus News Live with me, Usman Lone. We begin this news bulletin with our top story, and that's US President Donald Trump, who's become the third president in the nation's history to be impeached by the House of Representatives. The House voted to impeach Trump for obstruction of Congress and abuse of power related to his dealings with Ukraine. More in this report.
Donald Trump has formally joined the exclusive club of impeached presidents. He now faces trial in the Senate, but his removal from the White House will be very difficult in a Republican-controlled upper house.
I've made up my mind about the accusations. I've seen the transcript. I understand the basic tenets of what Sunderland's saying. This hearsay upon hearsay. I've never believed this was an impeachable offense. I've got no problem with the phone call. The guy ran on corruption, and there's been questions for a long time about why the guy was fired.
On Tuesday, Trump accused House Speaker Nancy Pelosi of declaring war on American democracy in a 6-page open letter. The Republican Party has been united in supporting Trump while he continues his aggressive approach.
They're lousy politicians, but they have two things. They're vicious. They're the most vicious people. The Republicans aren't as vicious. They may learn to be vicious after going through this stuff. But the other thing, the Democrats always stick together. Now think of it. 3 Democrats went over to our side, no Republicans. It's unheard of.
Donald Trump's predecessors, Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton, were the only U.S. presidents to face impeachment. Johnson was accused of 11 impeachment articles, while Clinton faced perjury and obstruction of justice inquiries.
Well, thousands of people have come out in favor and against the impeachment of President Donald Trump. Demonstrators gathered in Michigan to condemn the impeachment, while its supporters staged rallies in Colorado, California, and Arizona. Trump supporters lined up for hours ahead of his Michigan campaign rally. Protesters branded the probe shameful, saying the president had committed no crime. But anti-Trump rallies in Oakland, Denver, and San Francisco welcomed the constitutional process taken up by House Democrats. Well, the U.S. Congress has decided to impose extra sanctions on banks and companies dealing with North Korea. The sanctions bill is named after Otto Warmbier, an American student who died in the U.S. after being detained in North Korea for over a year. The bill lists mandatory sanctions on North Korean textile imports and exports of coal and other minerals. Yesterday, a bipartisan group of U.S. senators warned North Korea of further economic embargoes in response to any provocations. Earlier, China and Russia proposed a draft UN resolution calling for some sanctions against North Korea to be lifted. Well, in a related development, China and Japan have both agreed to work on North Korea's denuclearization while tensions grow between Washington and Pyongyang. The understanding was reached after a meeting between Japan's Defense Minister Taro Kono and his Chinese counterpart General Wei Fengzhi in Beijing. The two sides discussed the importance of fulfilling UN Security Council resolutions on North Korea. Expressing a desire to increase mutual trust, Kono said that there are still concerns between the two countries, including the East China Sea issue. Tokyo and Beijing also decided on strengthening communication with each other. This is the first visit by a Japanese defense chief to China since 2009. The Indian government has suspended mobile networks in New Delhi and Uttar Pradesh to stop protests against the citizenship law. Police have detained hundreds across the country for defying a ban on protests, including prominent historian Ramachandra Guha. Mobile companies Vodafone and Airtel confirmed they received government orders to suspend networks. Activist Yogendra Yadav says he's been arrested with others at the Lal Killa in New Delhi. Leading Indian historian Ramachandra Guha and 30 other protesters have been arrested in the city of Bengaluru in Karnataka. Meanwhile, authorities have shut down 18 metro bus stations in New Delhi to stop the protests. The government also imposed Section 144 in the states of Lucknow and Uttar Pradesh. Well, the Pakistan Army says it will respond to any Indian misadventure along the line of control. Earlier, Indian Army Chief Bipin Rawat said the situation along the LOC can escalate at any time. Military spokesman General Asif Ghafoor said the Indian Army's chief's provocative statement is an effort to divert the world's attention from its citizenship law protests. Earlier, Pakistan Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said India has partially removed the fence on the LOC in 5 sectors. In a letter to the UN Security Council, he said India has deployed BrahMos anti-tank guided and spike missiles for use across the LOC. Pakistan has rejected India's baseless allegations of persecution of religious minorities in the country. Citing pre-partition data of 1941, India claimed minorities declined from 23% in 1947 to 3.7% in 2011 in Pakistan. In a statement, the Pakistan Foreign Office said Delhi has omitted 2 major events of migration in 1947 and the separation of East Pakistan. The office said the total population of minorities in Pakistan has increased by over 0.5% in 47 years. It also said the Hindu population in Pakistan has increased from 1.5% in 1951 to nearly 2% in 1998. U.S. Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad says Washington is approaching an important phase of the Afghan peace process. Khalilzad made the statement after completing a visit to Kabul and meeting the country's leadership. The envoy has called his 2-day Kabul consultation a productive trip. He said the parties discussed ways of reducing violence and opening dialogue. Khalilzad also met the U.S. ambassador in Kabul, John Bass, and the U.S. and NATO forces commander in Afghanistan, General Austin Scott Miller. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says the fate of the world's Muslims is no longer in the hands of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. He was speaking at the Kuala Lumpur summit, and Erdogan said the world is bigger than the 5 veto power states. He said despite attempts to silence Turkey, Ankara insists on calling attention to Palestine, the Rohingya crisis, Libya, Somalia and Syria. Also speaking at the summit was Iran's President Hassan Rouhani, who condemned the US for threatening sanctions on other countries. Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad said the Muslim world is passing through a state of crisis and the summit may find solutions to these challenges. Now, a court in the Philippines has found the senior members of a political clan guilty of masterminding the 2009 massacre of 57 people. Members of 3 generations of the influential Amputuan family were among those sentenced to life imprisonment on multiple counts of murder. Over 28 people received the maximum penalty of life imprisonment. The Amputuan family is a dynasty in the southern province of Maguindanao. They had been accused of conspiring to ambush the convoy of a rival clan. Among the casualties were the wife and relatives of a rival candidate, lawyers and 32 reporters. The brazen attack was the country's single worst case of election violence. Lebanon's caretaker Prime Minister Saad Hariri has announced he will no longer pursue the top job. In a statement, Hariri said he will be involved in selecting a new premier despite his withdrawal. It remains unclear who will be the next Prime Minister, with Hariri's Future Movement parliamentary bloc set to meet later this morning. Any Prime Minister must be approved by a majority of the 128-member parliament. Hariri made his announcement 50 days after resigning the post against a background of massive protests against the ruling elite. Bolivia's prosecutors have issued an arrest warrant for exiled ex-president Evo Morales on sedition and terrorism charges. The interim government claims Morales promoted violent clashes that led to 35 deaths before and after he left office. Police have confirmed the warrant. Last month, Interior Minister Arturo Murillo filed a criminal complaint against the former socialist leader. The case against Morales centers on a video where he's allegedly directing a Bolivian man to plan roadblocks.
It's not possible that Mr. Evo Morales, after the people believed in him so much, orders his people to be killed, orders that food shouldn't enter the cities. This is a crime against humanity.
Crimen de lesa humanidad, señores.
In Spain, Catalonia's highest court has sentenced the region's leader Quim Torra to an 18-month ban on holding public office. Torra was found guilty of disobedience after he failed to obey an order to remove separatist propaganda from public offices during election campaigning. The court also imposed a fine on Torra of over $33,000. The ruling will only come into effect if it's confirmed by Spain's Supreme Court, which could take months. While staying in Spain, thousands of pro-independence protesters took to the streets of Barcelona during a football match between Barcelona and Real Madrid. 46 demonstrators were injured and 5 others arrested in clashes with the police. Thousands of fans inside the stadium held up banners urging the government to hold talks with Catalan separatists. More protesters gathered outside the stadium chanting independence and calling for people they described as political prisoners to be freed. The match was postponed in October over protests against the conviction of 9 Catalan separatist leaders. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has criticized member states for violating a UN-imposed arms embargo on Libya. Guterres described Libya's situation as similar to cancer, spreading instability and conflicts in several parts of Africa. He said it's frustrating that the Security Council's embargo and requests for a ceasefire are not being respected. Guterres said several member states are providing weapons to both sides of the conflict every week. Well, we'll be back with more news from around the world right after this short break. Hello again, it's good to have you back. Now, Australia has yet again experienced its hottest day as the national average temperature reached a record 41.9 degrees Celsius. This beats the previous record set only 24 hours earlier by 1 degree. Tuesday's 40.9 degrees Celsius record eclipsed the previous high of 40.3 degrees Celsius set in 2013. Meanwhile, a 7-day state of emergency has been declared in New South Wales. State authorities are currently fighting 100 bushfires in a crisis that has lasted months. More intense heat was forecast for the rest of the week. Prime Minister Scott Morrison's government has been criticised for its response to the fires and its climate policies. The Global Alliance on Health and Pollution says India led the world in pollution-linked deaths in 2017, followed by China and Nigeria. In a report, the body found pollution to be the largest environmental cause of premature death on the planet, claiming 8 million lives. In 2017, India and China suffered 2.3 million and 1.8 million deaths respectively. The report says India has seen increasing industrial pollution with bad sanitation and contaminated indoor air a factor in poor communities. It said divided risk factors into air, water, occupational and lead. The agency said pollution is a global crisis which worsens every day. Now in business, in a rare move, Amazon, Apple and Google are partnering up with each other to improve the compatibility of their smart home products. They've called the scheme a Project Connected Home over IP. More in this report.
3 of the world's biggest tech companies, Apple, Amazon and Google, have put aside years of competition to create a joint technology standard. The new benchmark is aimed at smart home products like Amazon's Echo, Apple's HomePod and Google's Home. The businesses say they want to develop and promote a new royalty-free connectivity standard. They said it would increase compatibility among smart home products, with security as a fundamental feature.
Well, it's 12 degrees here in Lahore, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that's the news for now, and for the latest updates on all of our stories, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.